All right, we start off with the Standard newspaper this morning. Numbers don't lie, that's the headline on the front page. It's crunch time, they call it, that President William Ruto's upbeat claims about the economy are now clashing with his own data. The latest government survey lays bare a slowdown he has repeatedly downplayed, with economic growth slowing to 4.6%, key sectors losing momentum and external shocks tightening the squeeze. Job creation is still falling short of Ruto's pledge to deliver 1 million jobs a year. And while fuel-driven inflation is creeping up again, adding pressure on households already strained by high living costs. The numbers puncture the narrative of resilience and expose an economy drifting, of course, turning its central claim into a growing political liability ahead of 2027. The Standard has captured the story on page 4 and 5, and they've also given just a general outlook on the sectors that registered slower growth. That includes agriculture, that slowed to 2.8% from 4.4%. Manufacturing eased to 2% from 3%. Transport and storage dipped to 3.7% from 4.3%. We also have accommodation and food services, which fell sharply to 15.6% from 25.9%. And ICT slowed from 4.8% from 7.1%. And we also have financial services and insurance, which eased to 6.5% from 7.5%. So these are the sectors that registered slower growth. And this headline cuts across various newspapers, just talking about how the economy has fared on 3.5 years in of President William Ruto's regime.
And I think agriculture is perhaps the most shocking given the kind of government intervention, especially with the fertilizer subsidy that enabled the economy to grow quite fast in 2024. But then if it's slowing down now to 2.8% growth, then questions will be asked. So what is the plan? We thought we were on an upward trajectory. It's not happening. All right. Other stories, I think, on the Standard, New Justice Warsame on page 6, because the Standard has only used the front page for this story about the economic survey. So other stories like kama hiyo ya Justice Warsame kule ndani page 6, it's not that they've ignored it. Other stories, Mudavadi and Wetangula to meet Western MPs. So those are some of the stories given prominence. Back page matters Champions League. We're looking at the Standard Champions League, and this is when they're covering what happened between PSG and Bayern Munich. Mabao 9 kwa game moja. Yesterday, something was very different when Atletico Madrid hosted Arsenal. The goals were only 1-1. So Enrique says, don't worry, expect more of the same in the second leg of the semi-finals. So for those following Champions Leagues, the UEFA Champions League, you can enjoy the back page of the Standard. That's the Standard. The Daily Nation has decided to approach this economic survey report in a different way. It has done a comparison of the last 3 presidents. President Mwai Kibaki, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and now President William Ruto, and gives a comparison of 3 years of the 3 presidents. So President Mwai Kibaki, between 2003 to 2005, he inherited an economic growth of 2.9%, and by the time he was leaving, no, not leaving, by the 3rd year, the rate had grown, the GDP growth rate had grown to 5.8%. Yeah. For President Mwai Kibaki in 2013, he inherited 5.9 from his predecessor Mwai Kibaki. By the time he was getting to 2015, it had dropped slightly to 5.7. Then comes William Ruto. He inherited that 5.7 from Uhuru Kenyatta, and by last year, it was 4.6. So that comparison is what they've done. 3 presidents, first 3 years in office, slow growth. The country's annual economic scorecard shows mixed results. The interesting thing is that this survey is by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. It's the same government now telling you that this is a reality on the ground. Yeah. So the Daily Nation found space for that Supreme Court nominee's story. Court of Appeal Judge Mohamed Warsame has been nominated for appointment to the Supreme Court by the Judicial Service Commission. It's tucked in on page 12 of this paper. Now there's an even more interesting story. Nakumbuka ile story ya surrogacy. Fertility farms, apparently they have a plot to bribe senators over this surrogacy bill. Agencies seeking to sway proposed regulation of Kenya's surrogacy industry face accusations of raising funds to bribe senators. Huko nyuma. Si ati wamewa bribe. Apparently wanafanya kaharambe ndio. Anasema the firms are reportedly keen to have the assisted reproductive technology bill amended to allow foreign couples access Kenyan surrogates. The problem is that these people have been doing a lot of business kule nyuma. This bill, if at all it's passed and assented to, it would mean that the industry becomes very much formalized and everything you do is out there in the public. Now wataki hiyo sana. A new malaria spreading species threatens Nairobi and other cities. I thought walikuwa wamesema ati kuna malaria mpya, mosquito mpya inaua ile ingine. Sasa kuna malaria back in the pages. That is on page 3 of the Daily Nation. And on the back page, Sawe. I didn't know about Kejelcha Kiplimo was the one I was wary of. Now, Sebastian Sawe arrived last night from his heroics in London. This morning he'll be at State House and we'll be getting some live updates from there because the president is hosting Sebastian Sawe and other athletes this morning. So a lot of Sebastian Sawe will be talked about today. Champions League news, Mohamed Warsami, and of course, the economic survey report. That's the Daily Nation. Taifa
Leo, Ruto jikokota wanazungumzia masuala ya uchumi pia. Ingawa Ruto amezidiwa nguvu na Uhuru na Kibaki katika ukuaji wa uchumi, amewashinda katika ustawishaji ajira zisizo rasmi hasa sekta ya ujenzi. So in the informal sector. The story has been captured in page 2 and they just talk about it the way Daily Nation has also captured it. They say that Ruto's asilimia ya ukuaji wa pato la taifa katika mwaka wa 2025 ni asilimia 4.6. Wakati wa alikuwa Rais Uhuru Kenyatta, asilimia ya ukuaji wa pato la taifa katika mwaka 2015 ilikuwa asilimia 5.7, that is 5.7%. Alafu wakati wa hayati Mwai Kibaki, asilimia ya ukuaji wa pato la taifa katika mwaka 2005 ilikuwa asilimia 5.8. That's uchumi wa kuwa kwa kasi ndogo chini ya Rais Ruto ikilinganishwa na Uhuru na Kibaki katika miaka 3 ya kwanza. So we are not doing so well with regard to how economy is doing. That's the main story on the front page of Taifa Leo as well. Vidokeza zaidi, mbu wapya tishio la miji wagunduliwa. Ni habari katika ukurasa wa 4 wa gazeti hili. Wanasema uwepo wa wadudu hao umebainika Garissa, Wajir, Mandera, Lamu, Kitui na vile vile Tana River. Njama ya kuhonga maseneta, habari hiyo tumezungumzia katika gazeti nyingine. Bayani ya PA kulipiza kisasi dhidi ya PSG. Ni masuala ya spoti pia. Walishindwa kwa pengo la bao moja katika duru ya kwanza ya nusu finali ya UEFA, ila waazimia kufunza PSG goli. Kule juu zaidi, magari Garissa ya goma sababu ya usalama. Mamia ya wasafiri wakwama baada ya magari ya kuelekea Nairobi kukataa kuhudumu. Ni habari katika ukurasa wa 2 na Jaji wa Same amlemea Katwa Kigen. That's a very interesting headline there.
Yeah, you remember yesterday all papers had Katwa Kigen on the front page.
Yeah.
He was looking like probably the main candidate. Now today it would appear mambo haikumuendea vile yalidhani.
Yes, that's the Taifa Leo this morning.
All right, the Star today has taken a very different angle, not very different, but decided to focus on the positive side of this report, and it's on the jobs, because the Taifa Leo talks about the jobs creation being the one definitive factor that distinguishes between President William Ruto's time and the other 2 presidents. So it says the economy creates 822,100 new jobs despite slowdown. Now umeona vile amefanya hapo. Amefocus on the positive. Wengine watu wanasema slow growth, numbers don't lie, ni kubaya. Star amesema jobs are there. Over 30% of them in construction sector thanks to affordable housing. That's the Star. And that story is on page 4 and 5 because it is definitely the main focus of all these dailies today. Matters flooding also getting to the front page. Mvua, the weather. Na hapa wameka picha nzuri sana. Hata rais mwenyewe akiwa na mwavuli. Sababu mvua ilinyesha. Si ati huwa inakosa kunyesha State House. Ako pale chini. Flooding misery as rains pound metropolis. Na barabara nyingi za mjini zimeharibika. And the Star has those photos there. Someone wading through flood water. And the president also having to hold Kini hii unasema, is this just optics? I'm sure there are people who can drive him from one place to another at State House. But anyway, him and other leaders are there. President William Ruto, his deputy and Kirinyaga Governor Nweguru, after a meeting with a delegation from Kirinyaga at State House. Yes. Farmers count massive gains after Ruto's Murang'a visit is another story on page 21. Grade 6 pupil killed in fresh attacks in Kitui. I remember we had Joe Mutambu here yesterday, and he raised this concern that sections of Kitui are experiencing some unrest, and this has caused a number of deaths that could escalate further tension between communities in that area. Away from that, Paleju, the top strip, they found space for what's happening with the JC interviews and that nominee, Mohamed Warsami, to the Supreme Court. Yes. And matters politics, Jubilee State House hopeful Matiang'i calls for united Nyanza. Back page of the Star, it steers clear of matters international football. Nalitanga local. Battle for last 4 in local league football. Cup semi-final, sport at stake as Ulinzi Stars host Tusker. And that's the Star today.
All right, let's take a look at Business Daily, and they also take a positive look into this economic survey. Real wages grow for first time in 6 years, and kumbuka kesho ni Labor Day. So salary rises in 2025 surpassed inflation or cost of living measure for the first time in 6 years, despite employers having offered workers a smaller pay increase. Mliongeza mshahara?
Now kutuambia.
You guys come by living large. Now, this newspaper says inflation-adjusted earnings or real wages, a barometer for measuring employees' purchasing power, grew by 2.2% last year, marking the first time since 2020 that growth in workers' earnings has surpassed the increase in consumer prices, according to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Now, workers' real wages had fallen for 5 consecutive years, including a negative 0.3% in 2024. The positive growth, however, masks the impact of increased statutory deductions, including contributions to SHIF, housing levy, and enhanced remittances to what? Let's take a look at this. To the National Social Security Fund, that is NSSF, that ate into employees' payslips for the better part of last year. This is a very interesting read. Hata unaona nasikia tu niendelee niwasomee yote, but it's on page 3. Inakuhusu, so you can take a look at this story right there. There's another interesting story on the front page of the Business Daily. Apartment prices fall following excess supply in Nairobi. Now, I would want to know, easy falls imekuwa areas gani, so that we can move to those areas. Because there's also been this conversations that one bedroom sasa hivi, kitambo zilikuwa unapata very good one bedroom at 10,000 Kenyan shillings. Right now, one bedroom is 30,000 Kenyan shillings, a decent one.
Ukienda maeneo kama Thindigwa, your one bedroom utalipa double that amount.
60K.
Yeah, it's getting... So I'm wondering, okay, fine. Those areas are probably in Kiambu, but areas I think people are focusing on are especially in Kileleshwa, with the mushrooming of apartment blocks. There are quite a number, they're high-rise.
Yes.
25 floors and above.
And Kilimani and the likes.
Yes.
So this newspaper says apartment prices in Nairobi suburbs fell in the year to March 2026 as supply of the units exceeded demand, with developers leaning on standalone houses sales and rising rental prices to drive their returns on investment. That's another story on page 14. On the Tika, state cuts housing levy investment in treasury bills, micro lenders seek longer threshold for loan default, and Trump plans new AGOA without duty-free access. And that's the Business Daily.
All right, it's the same focus on the People Daily. Economy slips again as agriculture dips, and I think that's the main question. If agriculture is dipping, and that's our mainstay, that's the mainstay of our economy, what does this mean? Incidentally, agriculture is also a devolved function, and we'll be having members of county assemblies from different counties helping us discuss these headlines later on today. So do stand by for that. So it's the main story there, state of the past on the People Daily. Tuvuke border tuone ndugu zetu wale wa kule Kampala wanazungumzia nini. On the Daily Monitor this morning, they call it Judgment Day. Today, the High Court is scheduled to decide the fate of Christopher Okello Onyum, who's 38 years old, who is accused of murdering 4 toddlers at Gaba Early Childhood Development Program in Kampala. And this is impressive compared to Kenya. Hii case ingetake, remember the case in Shakahola? It's, I think, 4 years on, na bado inaendelea. In in Kampala, this incident happened like 2-3 weeks ago, and it's already Judgment Day today. Daylight soup, matters crime in Kampala, and kuna watu wameshikwa pale na wakaambiwa watu watoe shati na walale pale chini wapate kinini adabu. Hiyo ni Daily Monitor. The other paper is the New Vision. PDM, government expands cash access. That's the main story there. And Museveni, UK envoy discussed bilateral partnership. So New Vision, not very interesting on the front page today. Let's take a look at Tanzanian papers. We start off with The Citizen. Why UAE's OPEC exit is unlikely to hit Tanzania. Still more focus on fuel prices, even in Tanzania. Kumbuka bado tumekuwa tukizungumzia the new or the anticipated refinery that will be opened somewhere in, is it Tanga? In Tanzania, Uganda, part of that. Ali Dangote is part of that as well. So fuel prices still the mainstay of discussions in Tanzania. According to The Citizen, gazeti la Mwananchi, gharama za maisha. So them they are already looking ahead at Labor Day, which is tomorrow. Mei mosi mwaka huu ni kilio cha gharama za maisha, ndio habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti hili. Sema maadhimisho kufanyika kesho sambamba na kupanda kwa nauli, huku bei za mafuta zikiwa zimepaisha bidhaa na huduma. Wafanyikazi wapaza sauti wasubiri kauli ya serikali. So matters workers and their rights and salaries. Kenya ni kama tuzungumzia hayo. Economic slowdown. What will it mean for the speeches that you expect tomorrow at the Labor Day celebrations, which incidentally will be held in Vihiga? And those are the papers, both local and regional. Let's take a look at the cartoons this morning in Kenya.